Professor of Law, Dr. Firas Musili. He will give us a lecture, International Economics of Startups. Mr. Musili is founding partner of Lloyd and Musili and regularly advises business clients of scientific technology law issues. He specializes in consulting technology companies from startups in the early and development and protection as intellectual property. He has experience in the intellectual property growth, specialized in patent litigation as a registered US patent attorney. Mr. Musili was a guest lecturer of the University of Texas School of Law. He is recipient of the George Susan Covington Pro Bono Award from Voluntary Legal Services. And today we have a pleasure to listen lecture of Professor. Topic, as I said, International Economics of Startups. And if you have some questions, you could ask Professor after the end of the lecture. Thank you. Please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for hosting me here at KPI. I am honored to be presenting today on the global economic impact of startups. A brief introduction to myself. I just wanted to give you a little bit of context related to my technical background. So I'm managing partner of a boutique law firm based in San Francisco, California. Previously, I was senior counsel at Apple. Before joining Apple, I was global counsel for Dell in Austin, Texas. And I had practiced as a lawyer at DLA Piper after law school. So I have degrees in law, a master's in computer science engineering, and engineering degrees in biomedical engineering and computer science. This makes me uniquely qualified as a technology lawyer, and it's been my passion to be working with startups specifically. To give you an overview of our lecture today, I wanted to provide an introduction to Silicon Valley and this culture around startups. I also want to talk about the impact that startups have on job creation, technology advancement, creation of new markets, how these startups boost production of goods and services, and the actual local impact that it has on the cities and regions that these startups are formed. We'll have a conversation about global economics. Using the USA as an example, we'll talk about India, another developing economy that's had a fantastic result with their startup scene. And then we'll focus on Ukraine specifically. Who's familiar with this TV show? We have a show of hands. If you're not familiar with this TV show, you're almost certainly familiar with a TV show that aired on HBO right after. Obviously, one of the most popular TV shows was Game of Thrones. And this was a bit of a comedy that was introduced before the heavy drama of Game of Thrones. Silicon Valley is a satire, a parody of the culture of Silicon Valley. It talks about startups, and startups have become so popular within the US and the global economy that it has earned a place for sarcasm and satirical analysis of the very real stories that you'll end up seeing that happen as part of Silicon Valley. you'll see that this TV show, even from the cover, is posed in the iconic stance of Steve Jobs, with his trademark black turtleneck and his pose. The story about Silicon Valley is about 5 friends and their journey to create a software that's going to completely disrupt the internet. Almost an internet 2.0. Now, while this is a comedy, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from it, and that we'll talk about here. Because startups, while they might be funny when they start, become real global players in the economy. Everyone here is familiar with Facebook. Facebook was created at a university just like this, in dormitories between students with an idea, and something that had started as a silly idea related to rating the attractiveness of the female population at Harvard became one of the biggest social impact companies in terms of networking and our ability to communicate across the world. Not only was Facebook a famous startup, but we have other global corporations that had very, very humble beginnings. Whether it was a business school project that you ended up seeing for MBAs at Uber. We talked about Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and the Winklevoss twins at Harvard. Airbnb being a business that completely revolutionized the hotel industry. No one could have anticipated that we had an existing supply of rooms that could readily compete with the hotel industry. The same way that Google took something that was fairly commonplace. There were many search engines before Google, and frankly, more popular. But who here remembers Alta Vista? Yahoo, Ask Jeeves, all of these companies that had, at the time, superior products, that only because there's a shift in the business model that it can end up revolutionizing an industry. The same way that Uber changed a taxi cab industry that hadn't changed in over 100 years. The idea that we can have on-demand transportation, and not only taxis, but think about all of the delivery services that are built on the same principle. Here locally, we use Glovo, and we think about ordering food or groceries or things from the pharmacy. It's changing the way that we deal with our lives. But I want to take a step and give you a sense for how massive, how large this technology industry is. These are numbers that are going to be very difficult for us to understand, even as economics students. When you end up realizing that last year, the US technology industry alone became more valuable than the entire European Union's economy. $9.1 trillion. Again, this is a figure that's absolutely massive, incomprehensible really to the ordinary mind. You could spend your entire life and your children's life and your grandchildren's life counting, and you'd never approach $1 trillion, let alone $1 billion. what's absolutely fascinating as well is that this all happened over the course of almost 1 decade. In 2007, the European Union economy was worth 4 times the US technology economy. So within the span of these 12 years, we ended up seeing a tremendous growth. It's not just the dollars or the actual value that we're talking about here, but the actual impact on everyday lives. We use the word startup all the time, but people don't recognize how much this is the way that we revolutionize industries and revolutionize technology. Our focus here today is to talk about the economic growth that can come from startups. What's funny is that most people think about startups only when the economy is bad. Typically, when people are having unemployment, when they're having layoffs, they think about alternative employment. If I cannot get a job at KPMG, at Accenture, at IBM, one of the big companies, maybe this is the time for me to innovate. Maybe this is the time for me to start my own business. So you'll end up seeing this change in the way that people will invest their time. You'll also end up seeing that startups can be created anywhere. Really, the only thing that you need is a computer and an internet connection to become started. And this is why it's been a tremendous focus of developing economies. Because just like in Egypt, where you've seen an explosion in the number of startups that have been created and the amount of dollars that are being generated. Why? Because usually in developing economies, you have unique problems. Unique problems that require unique solutions. And this is why you'll also see that these kind of problems also present the biggest opportunities. I've talked about Egypt. India will focus on later in this presentation. Israel is another country that's become very well known for its startup scene and the collaboration that it has with the government, specifically around information technology and security. That's the collaboration that it has with the military and the government. Estonia has also become well regarded with regards to startups and technology, given the facilitation from the government to be able to create companies. So I leave you with this idea that Ukraine is experiencing its own set of unique challenges, not only in the economy, but with this explosion of the IT industry as well. These are the type of situations that make startups the perfect vehicle for change. But we often use this word startup. Startup. What does it really mean? How is it really different from any other company? And we'll address that here. The entire mentality that comes along with a startup is the exact opposite of a large corporation. And we'll look at the individual factors as well. But you have to realize that startups are not smaller versions of large companies, even if they are dealing with some of the same issues. Then a natural question is, what's the difference between a startup and a small business? Aren't they essentially the same? But you'll see, again, in this presentation, that the very way that you think and that you plan as part of a startup is completely different from how you would operate a small business. There's been a well-established definition for a startup. And they say that it's an organization that's searching for a repeatable and scalable business. This isn't just a buzzword. You end up seeing that, again, repeatable and scalable. Take a look at this, and it'll give you some context. When we're talking about small businesses, you're all familiar with the local cafe, with the restaurants, other professional service providers, right? Whether they're doctors, lawyers, accountants, consultants, even retail, any of the clothing shops, fashion, those are typically what you end up thinking of as a small business. But the growth intent of a small business is very different from a large corporation or a startup. You'll see that with a small business, you're looking at focusing on small sales. You're focused on a neighborhood or a city or potentially a region. And being profitable is key. This is the fundamentals of business that we've known forever. You don't start a business to lose money. But we'll talk about how startups changed this idea. The funding methods for a startup are also very different from what you would end up seeing with a small business. A small business, typically, you'll take a personal loan, you'll use your private funds, you'll go to a bank and receive a loan with interest. And that's the way that typical small businesses are formed and grow. It's an expensive way of receiving capital, but you maintain full ownership and control. The final point that we distinguish between a small business and a startup relates to what your end vision is. Most people that start a business or start a small business really want independence. They want the ability to be free from a boss. They have a passion or an idea that they want to explore. And ultimately, as a small business owner, you make more money by increasing your efficiency and you cutting your costs. The idea is that you want your small business to be self-sustaining and last for a long time. Note the differences that we're about to see with startups. Startups, again, the typical examples that you'll end up seeing are companies that are either online or use technology to reach a large market. You don't necessarily need to be technology focused to be a startup. And again, think about this. Uber and its connections to all of these cars and individuals that are driving are powered by transportation, right? And we're using traditional cars and vehicles. This is not a spaceship yet. It's not a drone yet. But the idea is that you're using technology, the use of a smartphone application, to end up revolutionizing an industry. The growth intent with a startup is also completely different from a traditional small business. You'll hear, change the world. And this is a huge statement, but it is fundamental to many, many startups in the way that they end up approaching an industry. You have to be able to scale You have to be part of a massive market. This is also critical. A lot of people miss this part, right? They think they can solve a problem as part of a startup, but it's a very, very small market. And then finally, you have to have this rapid or fast growth. The other difference with startups is the way that they end up receiving funding. So startups don't typically go to a bank and ask for a loan, because no bank would give money to a startup that has no assets, no experience, no history, nothing. It's not what a bank would safely and conservatively invest their money. Startups require what are called venture capitalists or angel investors. These are very different people that you approach with a business plan. Why? Why are they different? Number one, they're writing much larger checks. Typically, you're looking at something on the order of $1 million. You also have a much greater expectation of a return on your investment. These investors and VCs, they're not looking to make 50% return, 30% return, which is a great return for most investments. They're looking at 100x. This is the idea, that they're investing in a company that's going to grow and become what's known as a unicorn. Who here knows what a unicorn is? And I'm not talking about the magical, mythical creature, the horse with the horn that's in every girl's fairy tale. A unicorn within the startup world is a company with a valuation over $1 billion. So when you end up investing early on, and you can end up writing a check for $100,000 or $1 million, and it ends up coming back at a valuation 1,000, 3,000, 10,000 times, you can understand that it's almost a form of gambling, really. Like going to a roulette table and putting a big bet on one number. Again, the end vision that's also very different for a startup versus a small business is the fact that a startup is only a temporary state. And this is an important concept. You have to understand that a startup is only a placeholder. The idea is to be able to quickly prove your idea, receive funding, and then there's three ways that this story ends. You either become a massive corporation through an initial public offering, you get acquired, right? Some bigger company comes and decides to either buy your assets or buy your people. Or three, you fail, you close up, and most of the time, you go do it again. Just in a different sphere. Let's talk about why startups have this unique advantage over these larger corporations. We talked about how a startup is intended to be temporary. The idea is that they're searching for a business model or a fit that makes sense. A startup can be changing its ideas, changing its product, almost on a weekly basis. There is no reason that if they get feedback from one big customer that this is not the product that they're looking for, or not the service that they're looking for, that they can't change it the following week. The difference between a large enterprise, and we use the word enterprise to mean a large company or a large corporation. Those companies are built for execution. They already have a very well-defined plan, and the only thing they should be doing is executing on the plan. And if you're busy executing, you do not have time for the innovation, because innovation is disruptive. It changes. If I come in and end up telling you, listen, we're no longer using PCs in the university. We're no longer using Windows. We're changing everything to Mac or the iOS. There's a huge cost. There's a downtime that's associated with it. And you'll see every organization has these problems and they'll struggle against it. They don't want to make IT changes because they're already making business. They're already making money. Startups, on the other hand, it's a bet everything scenario. If they don't change and find the perfect fit, they die. Employees for these large enterprises are always measured and evaluated on their execution. How many sales did you complete? How many new customers did you sign? All of these KPIs, KPI being a key performance indicator, are things that focus on execution, not creativity. So these very KPIs and processes that are built to make a company efficient are the root cause for why corporations cannot be agile or responsive. The same policies and procedures that you see to make sure that everyone does the work the same way doesn't allow for the creativity and for someone to come in and decide, hey, let's change all of this. That being said, I think it's important to just give some context. The prevailing statistics say that 90% of startups fail. This is important. Why? It reminds you that a startup should only be a temporary organization. It's a placeholder for you to be able to search for that product fit. You'll see that here, I've chosen some of the top reasons. But number 1 and number 2 are probably the most important. You have to make sure that you understand the market and what the market demands and what they're willing to pay for. Number 2, most of these startups just run out of cash. So you'll see that a huge focus for creating healthy startup ecosystems is to make sure that there is cash that's being injected. I want to talk about some of the benefits that we'll end up seeing from startups in economies. And I have a list of these sources at the end of the presentation in case any of you want to be able to follow up or read more. And these statistics are specific to the US economy. The most data that we have on startups is from the United States. So this first part of the presentation will focus on that, and then we'll talk about some of the international aspects as well. We've seen statistics that show that job creation happens fastest and more frequently with these technology startups. They create high growth companies that end up adding jobs at a rate much higher than traditional industries. The same way you go into a cafe or a retail store, the only people that you want there are salespeople that are executing sales. You're not looking at the research and development that require massive amounts of hiring. What is a very, very interesting statistic, they had, without startups, there would be no net job growth in the US economy. From 1977 to 2005, existing companies were net job destroyers, losing 1 million net jobs per year. It's only these new businesses that ended up adding, on average, 3 million jobs annually. Again, when you end up thinking about large enterprises and the famous company General Electric, GE, which is studied throughout the world in business schools for efficiency. And the idea is that you would constantly be laying off 10% of your workforce. This is the way that you maximize shareholder profit. You'll end up seeing that, again, traditional companies and these big enterprises are not the job creators that small businesses and startups have proven to be. It's also interesting because of the statistic in 2017, where in the private sector, job growth is significantly higher where there's startup activity. And it's in direct contrast to other regions where they have fewer startups, they have less than half of the job growth. The next major contributor to startup injection into the economy is this technological advancement. You'll see that traditional companies are more likely to invest in research and development in existing technologies and in existing products. It takes a startup to come in and focus on something that's completely new. For a startup to fail, there's no embarrassment. If you build a product, and again, statistics say that 90% of startups fail, there's nothing wrong with that. And I know specifically here, within Ukraine, we had a client that built a product called EcoIzmi that ended up trying to focus on providing a more economic and environmentally measured of energy usage in the house. The big companies had absolutely no interest in this. This is something that ends up getting driven by either a passion, someone who is more environmentally friendly, more environmentally conscious, or that's looking for a product that changes their own life. You'll also end up seeing that startups as a percentage, and we'll see this later with a graph, invest a higher percentage of their money and their funding into research and development. This is the reason that large enterprises like Apple, like Google, like Facebook will end up simply acquiring some of these startups. The same way that you end up seeing Facebook acquired Oculus, right? The heads-up virtual reality headset. It's not because Facebook doesn't have an army of engineers or that it doesn't have the money. But again, this company, this startup, was able to create a product faster and better than most traditional large companies. And you see this all the time with acquisitions. The other thing that startups do is transform old markets by introducing these new products. We talked about Uber and what it did for the taxi business. We talked about Airbnb and what it did for the hotel business. Google did the same thing for advertising and marketing. In the history of mankind, we didn't have as much information about a consumer. Before, you would just walk past a billboard or an ad on the street, and you think, that's a nice jacket that this model is wearing. That's an interesting color. Maybe I'll go and buy it. Now, with the analytics that are available to each one of these companies, they know where you live, which region, what the average temperature is, when that season is changing. All information to even allow you to know when's the last time that you went to a store that sold jackets, and be able to target specific advertising for you to the level, and there's an entire article on this, where one huge retailer in the US, simply by analyzing the receipts and the purchases that one woman was making, knew to send her advertisements for her pregnancy that even her husband didn't know about. It's amazing. And when you think about all of these different ways that these companies can come in and change an industry, it's important to realize we need to make sure we can support startups. In the US specifically, you've been seeing a consolidation of companies. So more and more companies are getting bought. And you're seeing fewer and fewer companies that are independent. When you think about Facebook, most people don't instantly think that Instagram is also owned by Facebook. For the longest time, people were like, I'm not on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Like this was some line related to who's cool and who's not cool. And I know this because my grandmother is on Facebook. The idea being, with this acquisition, you have more and more information that's being concentrated. Those folks that were not on social media, were not on Facebook, not on Instagram, how would they communicate? They would use WhatsApp. Messaging, creating groups, being able to kind of have a conversation. That wasn't on social media. What did Facebook do? They bought WhatsApp. All of this information is getting consolidated and used to provide a richer profile for each one of you related to your interactions. So again, this type of innovation that you would end up seeing with a startup isn't what you would see with a corporation. Moving on, and I'll try to keep this at a faster clip here, but one of the things that is really important is that you'll end up seeing that companies that focus on startups end up driving production of goods and services. This 2017 report by the Center of Economic Studies that was at the US Census Bureau found that firms that have high growth are disproportionately young and make disproportionate contributions to output. The other thing that I found so interesting was a 2011 white paper. The Small Business Administration is a federal administration within the US government. But it ended up finding, even 10 years ago, that if you provide the same resources to a traditional company versus a startup, you'll see that the startups generate more revenue than a traditional company. I'm going to show you, I'm going to skip a slide just to show you Apple headquarters. This is in Cupertino, California. Absolutely massive. In 2017, Apple became the first $1 trillion company in the history of mankind. We'd never had a company that had that kind of valuation. And then, within 2 years, it became the first $2 trillion company. Can you imagine the kind of growth that we're talking about? To go from being a $1 trillion company in 2018 and then $2 trillion company. I say this again for the dollar figure, but also so that you know, Cupertino, California is a very small town. If you drove through it, you wouldn't even know that you were in it, really. And in Silicon Valley, you have many of these small towns, one after the other after the other. Mountain View, where Google is based, is not even a few minutes away. The point that I want to get, these companies, where they've been based, have completely transformed the local economies. Think about the other companies that have also completely changed their locales. Microsoft in Redmond, Washington. Google, we talked about in Mountain View. Amazon has basically taken over Seattle, Washington. These startups, when they become successful, have a huge influx of college graduates, university students that are coming for internships, and other workers that are coming to get employment. You'll see that the same thing that's happened for these local economies has happened all over the world. From Austin, Texas, where I worked for Dell, also becoming a huge startup hub, to Bangalore, India, Berlin, Germany. Huge, huge focus for technology and startups in the EU. We talked about Tel Aviv, Tallinn. There's no need to even mention, Estonia and all of its strides that it's made. And the government in the UAE, and specifically in Dubai, are making huge attractions to bring talent, to provide visa-free access for residency for startup entrepreneurs, because they recognize the value here. You're also seeing countries all over the world introduce what's called the digital nomad visa, to allow these folks to work locally and be able to contribute to the economy, knowing that this is the future of connected work. I want to talk about the impact on the US economy specifically, and we'll do this at a fairly fast rate here. But you'll see that this Kaufman Index of Entrepreneurship ends up providing an annual report on entrepreneurship in the US. They end up focusing not on the inputs for entrepreneurship, but the actual output activity. So you'll see the number of new companies that are being created, the business density, how many companies within a square kilometer, and the growth rates that you end up seeing. I've called out just a few of the interesting facts. Typically, we would always think of startups as university students, which is held true for a very long time. But the biggest growth has happened between the ages of 55 to 64, right? You'll end up seeing there was a 14.8% increase between 1996 and 2016. Tremendous growth for people that are more established and that have had traditional jobs getting involved in startups. The other thing that I think is very, very interesting, there's a lot of controversy around immigration, especially now in this age of refugees and migrants. But all of the statistics show that migrants have a positive impact and end up creating businesses and startups at a higher rate than natives and citizens. Here they talk about the fact that immigrants now account for almost 30% of all new entrepreneurs in the US, up from 13% in 1996. And when you end up thinking about Google, when you think about the CEO now of Microsoft, when you end up thinking about even Elon Musk, he was an immigrant to the US. These folks weren't native-born Americans. And I think that's important, not just for the policy related to immigration, but the idea that, hey, if you provide more resources for immigrants to start a business, they're more likely to be successful and to require less assistance from the state. I'll focus on some of the other kind of economic measurements on startups. In the US, even though startups are less than 5% of businesses, we've seen that they are proportionally providing a much larger contribution to the economy than their size would have you expect. The thing that I found the most interesting was related to this R&D investment. Massive percentage of the investments that are being made in research and development are coming from these startups. And the same thing that you'll end up seeing in these research and development jobs. You'll see that startups are providing more contribution than you would expect for their percentage as a whole. A couple of words about trends. We ended up looking at the last 10 years within the US. The number of startups has increased 47%. We ended up seeing an employment increase as well in the number of folks that are involved with startups. And finally, and I think this is also really important, they have a larger share of the technology-based employment than what you would end up seeing through traditional employment. I'm going to skip over some of these facts here, but I would like to share them if anyone is interested in knowing that on average, the rate of salary that you end up receiving as a startup engineer is not far below that of hiring and being an employee at a large enterprise. And you'll end up seeing that on average, when you end up factoring in the potential for equity, etc., you'll see that it's not far off. Let's turn to the Indian subcontinent. And I think this is really instructive for a number of reasons. India now is the third largest startup economy in the world, only after the US and the UK. What's really fascinating about this is because also it tracks the same trajectory that you had in the US, in the sense that in the early 90s, you saw some of these startups in India that have now become some of the biggest technology companies there. In 2019, Indian venture capital invested $10 billion, 55% more than the previous year. Imagine what would happen in Ukraine if you invested $10 billion into the startup economy. Not only have these startups changed the role of India from being just an outsourcing provider, and I think this is why I chose to focus on India, given the parallels with Ukraine. India was famous for being an outsource hub, for providing phone services, right, whenever there was technical support that was required, and business processes, right, for cheap place to be able to find accountants, etc. What's really incredible is that instead of just having this IT focus, they've been able to create technologies and to create and become major research and development centers for multinational companies. These scenarios have created over 30 unicorns for the Indian economy. And as you remember, a unicorn is a company valued at least $1 billion. Ukraine has a similar potential trajectory. If we can move away from just being IT focused, and this is going to be something difficult for most of you to even understand, because IT has been a tremendous growth in Ukraine. But we'll look at some of the ecosystem here statistics. Out of 100 startup ecosystems, Ukraine is ranked 29. These are statistics that I ended up receiving from the Ukrainian Startup Fund. There's only 4,000 startups in a population of 4 million. These were focused on specific segments here in Ukraine. For context, in Israel, you have a startup for every 1,400 people. Estonia, one startup for every 3,200 people. So we're not seeing the same level of startup activity, even though the Ukrainian government has earmarked funds to be able to promote startups. Up to date, and you've seen almost $6 million invested in Ukrainian startups. And these $6 million that were invested ended up receiving $20 million in follow-on investments, not including an additional $30 million in services and in-kind investments. So it should be obvious that, hey, $6 million invested by the Ukrainian Startup Fund ended up leading to over $50 million in returns. I wanted to list a few of the startups that came out of Ukraine here that had this high value. Many of you may be familiar with GitLab or Grammarly, People.ai. One of our clients is also Preply, right, for the online language services and tutoring. There's a tremendous potential for Ukrainian startups. And to see these numbers, to see GitLab, that deal at $268 million. Imagine just adding another 2 or 3 GitLabs to the Ukrainian economy and how that would end up transforming what your futures end up looking like, how the employment prospects are for future generations of Ukrainian students as well. I want to leave you with this final slide. We talked about some of the economic impacts, but it's important that we end up removing these barriers for formation of companies. In the US, you can start a company and have everything running within about 5 days. We do this every week for our companies. Here, they're working as part of the Ministry of Digitization to make that a faster process. You want to be able to make sure that you can facilitate connections. Silicon Valley is famous not because there's something special within the water or the ground or the air, but when you're in an environment that promotes creativity, which promotes entrepreneurship, and people can connect with one another at a cafe and create the next Facebook, those are the type of connections that we need to be able to facilitate here in Ukraine. Well, the federal support that we talked about for the Ukrainian Startup Fund is very important. It's also critical for the local governments and cities to be able to develop these startups as well. In Ivan Francis, we ended up seeing that this is also a focus for startups and technology. Just being a cheaper cost of living, cheaper real estate, etc., than you're seeing here in Kyiv. What I want to remind you of that these startups are a driving force within our economy, the global economy, and it is imperative that we provide an environment for these entrepreneurs to be able to also receive venture capital funding to be able to grow. So with that, I can close and see if we have any questions. I don't know how we want to conduct questions here from the audience. I know I've provided a lot of information to be able to digest, but if you simply come away with this idea that being a startup is, yes, it's a risky proposition when you end up seeing the 90% failure rate, but the potential returns in terms of not just economic value that you're creating, but personal fulfillment are the reasons that most of these entrepreneurs go on and do something that by all measurements is irrational. It's a romantic venture to be able to create a company and to be able to employ people locally and to grow your own economy. So with that, we'll go ahead and close then if there aren't any questions. All right. We have a question? Please.
My question is about the future. What do you think will be the forecast for startup growth in the future? Is it possible that this sector will keep this pace of development, or we will see some changes?
Fantastic question. We've seen the pace eclipse every expectation. There's a very common cited law called Moore's Law within the IT sphere related to the development of computer chips. And we thought that, hey, every 5 years we would see a doubling in the processing power of these computer chips. It's far exceeded that. The growth that we've seen so far has been absolutely tremendous. Can it continue to grow like this indefinitely? It's impossible. But really, when you think about it, the penetration of technology still has a long way to go. We're only seeing smartphones and adoptions in developing economies now reach, the 90% adoption rate. Now you have the infrastructure in place for communication, for everyone to hold a phone that's more powerful than a device that costs 10 times as much, even 4 or 5 years ago. So I see a continued growth. I'd like to be able to see a focus on intellectual property, on inventions, on a return. And I think this is a focus here, especially at a research institution like KPI, to be able to develop more of the science and technology for the future. So, thank you. We have another question.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this interesting lecture. And my question is about the field of the startups for Ukraine, for example, in your opinion, because we know that the field does really matter. And what is that field which is supposed to be the best for new emerging companies in Ukraine, for instance? Thanks.
I wish I could tell you this. I would be a much, much richer man if I knew exactly which of those fields this would develop. But I can tell you that the Ukrainian economy has been focused on agriculture for a very long time. And any innovations that we can end up seeing in terms of agro-tech, supply chain management, control of pesticides and other infectious insects, that would be a tremendous, easy solution, right, for Ukraine to be able to focus on. But again, agriculture doesn't have the same margins that we end up seeing with information technology. So the ability to produce finished goods or finished services or entertainment pieces, right, I believe have tremendous return as well, especially considering the fact that Ukraine is very strategically placed geographically and thinking about being a market not only internally, right, but for the surrounding regions. So those are some of the fields that I would end up thinking through. Obviously, software development is very exciting, but we've seen limited homegrown innovation. It's mostly been related to outsourcing for other companies internationally, simply as a low-cost center. The way you transform a product or a service is by creation of that intellectual property. Instead of providing just the software for a piece of a service, provide the entire product, and you'll end up seeing a much greater return. Any more questions before we close? Please.
I would like also to thank you for your lecture, and I have one question. You've mentioned Cupertino and other cities which were tremendously changed after startups were started there. And as for Ukraine, I don't know if you have this information. Our entrepreneurs, they usually move to European countries and to US also. and they don't locate their startups in Ukraine. They created their products, they generated idea, created their products, got some first investment, and afterwards they go away. So do you think it is really the possibility for Ukraine to develop our economy on taking here keeping here our entrepreneurs, and if is it possible, because we're not sure about that today. It's really a big question. Our startup entrepreneurs, they usually move and they become immigrants to other developed countries, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Fantastic question. Over the last 20, 30 years, we've seen this consistent brain drain, is what the technical term has been for, where folks in developing economies have received fantastic educations, like the one that you have here at KPI, have the creativity and know-how, but don't have the opportunity to end up applying. And through very easy migration for certain categories of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs, Western countries have taken advantage of this opportunity. You'll see that the number of Ukrainians, everything really in Silicon Valley, Egyptians, Brazilians, you know, basically the top folks from every country that can end up coming in there and providing a service. I think we're at an inflection point in history with this pandemic. This pandemic has really changed many calculations on what the notion of work even ends up looking like, what the connectedness is required to be in terms of a local workforce. You have a lot of people, and we mentioned this during the presentation about digital nomads and the ability to be able to relocate. Even Google and Apple and Facebook are struggling with this idea that many of their employees do not want to return to work in a traditional office environment or in these high-cost centers. San Francisco is the most expensive city to live in the entire United States. When your average one-bedroom apartment costs $3,500 a month, you have to factor in what this salary needs to end up being. So for a lot of reasons, I think there is going to be a trend towards international workforces. I think the idea that if you choose to create a company in Ukraine, you can certainly find the talent that you need here, but it would be a mistake to focus only on the Ukrainian market. And that's one of the advantages of being a startup. The idea is that you should have something that has potential, replicable applicability anywhere in the world. To the extent that the Ukrainian government makes it easier to create companies, makes it easier to set up equity, right, in relations. This is another legal subject. So even though all of these companies that we'll talk about will have founders or employees that might be Ukrainian, ultimately they are looking for a U.S. legal presence. There's a U.S. legal entity that needs to be set up. And again, I believe it's almost 90% of the investments that are coming into these startups are follow-ons from U.S. investors. So to the extent that the environment here is conducive, there's no reason that these entrepreneurs and these brilliant minds cannot thrive in an environment like Ukraine. I think we're over time. Thank you all for your attention today. We'll go ahead and close.